You hear these words all the time, right? Phishing, ransomware, data breach, they're all over the news. But what do they actually mean? Well, today we're going to decode all that jargon. We're breaking down the most common cyber threats you really need to know about, and we'll get into the real fascinating stories behind those crazy headlines. I mean, think about the headlines: the DNC hack, that huge NHS cyber attack, the Equifax breach. These aren't just abstract news stories, right? They had massive real-world consequences. We're talking major political scandals, entire hospital systems brought to a standstill, and the private data of millions of people just gone. So what's really going on behind the scenes? How do these attacks actually work? That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about a category of attacks that are kind of fascinating because they don't just exploit lines of code. Nope, they exploit us, our trust, our curiosity, even just our bad habits. This is all about the human element in cybersecurity, and honestly, it's often the weakest link in the entire chain.
And right at the top of that list is something you've probably heard of: phishing. The easiest way to think about it is, well, it's digital bait. It's a con. The goal is super simple: trick you into willingly handing over your most sensitive info. You know, an attacker dangles a really convincing-looking email or a fake login page right in front of you, just hoping you'll take the bait and bite. And here's what's so interesting when you look at the source material for this. Phishing isn't just some theoretical threat you read about in a textbook. It has literally shaped world events. And there's no better example of that than the infamous DNC email leak. The impact here was, well, it was enormous. All it took was a few cleverly disguised emails sent to campaign staffers. They were tricked into clicking a link, entering their passwords on a fake site, and boom. The result was a massive leak of sensitive emails that completely dominated the US presidential election that year. Think about that. That's the power of a single deceptive email. All right, next up in this category of tricking you is the man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, imagine you're having what you think is a private conversation, but someone is secretly listening in. And get this, they can even change what you say to each other without either of you knowing. That's exactly what this is, just in the digital world. It's basically high-tech eavesdropping. Now, a really crucial point here is that these attacks usually work by exploiting vulnerabilities that already exist. But here's the shocking part. Sometimes, those vulnerabilities are created by the very companies we're supposed to trust. And that brings us right to the infamous Lenovo superfish scandal. So picture this: it's 2015, and people discover that Lenovo has been shipping brand new laptops with this piece of software, adware really, that was supposed to help with visual searches. Okay, sounds harmless enough, but what it actually did was completely break the secure connections on the computer. It just blew a hole in the user's security, leaving them wide open to man-in-the-middle attacks. A company you trust had basically, and accidentally, created the perfect backdoor for hackers. All right, so we've covered attacks that trick people. Now let's shift gears. The next category is all about attacks that target the systems directly. The goal here isn't deception, it's straight-up digital disruption, locking people and businesses out of their own stuff. And that brings us to ransomware. Honestly, this is one of the most frightening types of attacks out there. You can think of it as digital kidnapping, for real. Malicious software sneaks onto your system, it encrypts all of your files, your photos, your documents, everything, making them totally useless. And then a message pops up demanding a ransom, usually in crypto, to get it all back. And the scale of these attacks can just be breathtaking. You really can't talk about ransomware without talking about the one that basically brought entire organizations to their knees: the WannaCry attack. So back in 2017, this thing called WannaCry just exploded across the globe. We're talking a matter of hours. The impact was devastating, but nowhere was it felt more than in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS. Hospitals had to cancel surgeries, turn away patients, all because their computer systems were completely locked down. It was just a terrifying reminder that these digital threats can have very, very real physical consequences. The other major player in the digital disruption game is the DDoS attack, or distributed denial of service. And there's a great analogy for this. If ransomware is like putting a big lock on the door to a building, a DDoS attack is like sending 1 million people to stand in front of that door so no one who's supposed to be there can get in or out. It's all about creating a massive digital traffic jam to just shut a service down. The whole idea is to just overwhelm the target. And in 2016, a massive DDoS attack on a company called Dyn really showed the world just how much of the internet we use every day relies on just a few key choke points.
What happened was hackers used a giant network of infected devices, like cameras and smart home gadgets, all roped into what's called a botnet to just flood this company Dyn. Now, Dyn is basically a key part of the internet's address book. So by taking down Dyn, they took down all the huge websites that rely on it. For hours, if you tried to go to Twitter or Netflix or Reddit, they were just gone, vanished.
All right, on to our final category. This one is all about attacks designed to actually get inside a system. And once they're in, the goal is pretty simple. Either steal valuable information or just cause as much damage and chaos as possible. So let's start with the one you've probably heard of most, the data breach. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's digital theft, plain and simple. An intruder finds a way into a supposedly secure network and just walks out the digital door with a ton of sensitive, private information that does not belong to them. And when you talk about data breaches, there is one name that just stands above the rest for its sheer, mind-boggling scale. And that is the Equifax breach from 2017. 147 million. That's how many Americans had their most personal data, we're talking social security numbers, birth dates, home addresses, stolen from this massive credit reporting agency. It was just a catastrophic failure of security that affected nearly half the population of the entire country. Now, you'll hear the word malware thrown around a lot. It's really just an umbrella term. It covers any kind of malicious software, viruses, spyware, even the ransomware we just talked about. Think of it as the digital weapon, the tool that's used to carry out a lot of these attacks. And malware can be incredibly, incredibly deceptive. A perfect example of this is the Petya attack, also from 2017. At first glance, it looked just like any other ransomware attack. It locked up files and demanded payment. But there was something much more sinister going on underneath the surface. So this is the really crucial difference to understand. WannaCry, which we talked about earlier, was basically a criminal enterprise. It was all about making money. It locked up your data, but the whole point was to sell you the key to get it back. Petya, on the other hand, that was pure destruction disguised as ransomware. It wasn't designed to give you your data back. It destroyed it permanently. Even if you paid the ransom, there was no key. The only goal was to cause absolute chaos. So, okay, we've talked about attacks that trick you, attacks that lock you out, and attacks that just steal and destroy. So what's the common thread here? What connects all of them? Well, it's one word: vulnerability. It doesn't matter if it's a human flaw, like someone falling for a phishing email, or a technical flaw, like a piece of unpatched software. That is the opening attackers are always looking for. And that really leads us to the final critical question, doesn't it? Our entire modern world, from our most personal data to our most critical infrastructure, it's all built on code. And as we've just seen, that code can be broken, it can be tricked, and it can be turned against us in some really scary ways. Which forces us to ask the big question: in a world that's built on code, what is our best defense?